Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. We got three guys today. We got my buddies Greg Sterling and John Gerard. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey,
Good.
how's it going? As I said before we started, a lot of coffee today, so I'm ready.
All right. Well, let's jump in. So a lot of things happening this week. I'm just going to go through a little list here, and then we'll jump into these stories. But this week, OpenAI introduces shopping results in ChatGPT, so integrating that experience. We'll talk a little bit about that. How AI agents are interacting with online ads, and then also how this impacts the future of search, SEO, SXO, AIO. There's all this alphabet soup around what's happening with the future of search. We'll dig into that. Trump's manufacturing revival. Automation takes center stage in that program. So we'll talk a little bit about what's happening there. AI's growing impact on the workforce. So there's a turning point in 2025 from a report that came out this week. So we'll dig into that and some notes from the field around operator and a few other thoughts there. So let's start out at the top here about OpenAI introducing shopping results in ChatGPT. Greg, you want to lead off with that one?
Sure. I mean, that was actually a kind of an upgrade of their existing capability. I mean, they had a version of shopping, but it was pretty, it was product comparison. You could ask about products and it would give you information, and it would, do matrices and other things to help you make decisions, but you couldn't buy anything. And there weren't a lot of images. I mean, there were some images. So what they've done, I think, is created a more structured experience that is sort of playing peekaboo a little bit. You don't always see it show up, where you get nice big product images, product details, and then on the right panel, very often you'll see a e-commerce style display of places to buy the product. So in their example, an espresso machine, you can, Walmart and Amazon and several other places. And I've seen that show up in a couple of other instances as well. And it's a much better experience than what existed before, because it's more familiar to people, but you can also, it kind of collapses the funnel, because you can show up and say, I want to buy a suitcase that'll fit in the overhead compartment on an airline, and it's durable and costs less than this amount of money, and it's this color, and it'll comply with that. So it'll really accelerate your research and then can lead you to a place where you can buy the item. And it's interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is obviously something that moves them into new territory where they can potentially monetize through ads or affiliate revenue or some, sponsored listings or something, monetize that traffic in a way that isn't quite as obnoxious, perhaps, as other forms of advertising. And Amazon is one of the choices very often. So I don't think this hurts Amazon in any way. I mean, it might long term if people start going to ChatGPT for everything and then just buy stuff on Amazon. But for the time being, it doesn't. But it might start eating into Google's product query volume. And that has been an area that they've invested billions and billions of dollars in to compete with Amazon over the past few years. So I think it's a very interesting development, very early, but promising. It's just a fatiguing experience to shop on Google for stuff, and also on Amazon, quite frankly. So what I typically will do now is go to some editorial content like the Wirecutter, choose the thing I want, go to Amazon and buy it, or go someplace else and buy it, and cut out all the tediousness of looking at this site and that site and looking at all these reviews and so on and so forth.
And you can see how, given what you said, the tediousness of doing all your research, that tool like Operator that can do all of these things for you, do the research, and then find the right product based on your criteria, then even purchase the product theoretically. John, you've been digging into Operator lately. This is our notes from the field here, but tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that you're doing there.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting sort of place to insert this conversation, because in some ways, the shopping experience that Greg just described is sort of a very tuned operator experience, right? So Operator is more of a general purpose tool that can do lots of things in lots of places and navigate the web for you. And the shopping experience that Greg was describing is something kind of more purpose built for shopping. And so, I would say that difference, general purpose tool versus very specific tool, is pretty important right now. And one of the things that it means is that operator is a little clunky, right? So in exchange for being able to do a very broad range of things, including shopping, if you wanted it to, you have to kind of wait. It reminds me a little bit of watching my grandmother surf the web and moving her mouse very slowly and around and then clicking on something. And
Right.
so
Exactly.
there's sort of that type of experience right now. And that's fine. That's the way it's going to be. That's a function of the way that operator works, which is it actually uses machine vision. I would have thought they would have approached this differently, which is to actually download the HTML and kind of navigate it that way. But they don't. They actually take a picture of the page and say, where would I click on this page in order to get this next part of my task done? And then they navigate the mouse.
Very cumbersome.
Yeah,
very cumbersome.
Presumably there's some good technical reason for that. I imagine it's that they have a lot more data of people navigating websites than they do of machines navigating HTML to get things done on websites. That would be my guess as to why they do that. I also imagine that over time, that there will be probably additions to HTML, other kinds of markup that are kind of like AI friendly markup, in the same way that we have various tags that we put in HTML to, speak directly with search engines, that kind of thing. So, it's a little bit limited right now, but it's pretty fascinating in the sense that it has a lot of capabilities that are missing from the core ChatGPT. And the most notable among those are the ability to surf the web and interact with it, and then the ability to perform some certain things somewhat autonomously, so to do things on a timed schedule or other things interacting with other systems. So we're getting there, but it's a little slow going at the moment.
I bumped up my ChatGPT membership to the highest level to get access to that initially. And it was kind of fascinating conceptually, but it was just painful. It was so painful to sit there and watch the thing go through its snail's pace maneuvering. But I recognize this is just an embryonic stage, and it's going to be quite a different thing in a few years when our dishwasher broke. It's not draining properly. And, in the future, I'll be able to say, I need an appliance repair technician to come out. This is my availability, and so on and so forth. Book it, make sure that they have, this kind of rating level or reviews, and, be able to do that without and just collapse that whole process, which, might take a half an hour, might take 2 hours, depending on how thorough you're being into something very quick, plus the booking. I mean, I look forward to that kind of thing, but it raises all these questions, which, we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, about how much are humans going to be interacting with individual websites versus machines. Will there be a handful of, this in a way takes the Google problem to a new extreme. The problem that Google has created is that people use it for everything, and it's this middleman between you and the content, and publishers have complained forever about not being in control, not owning the user, being at Google's mercy. What if that gets much worse with something like agents and ChatGPT, where you've got such a convenient and useful thing that you never have to visit any websites anymore? Go ahead. Right. Sorry.
And I would add to that, there's a really interesting bit of psychology going on here too, which is, in the branding world, there's this sort of concept that we form human-like relationships with brands, and we talk about things like trust. And that's a very human thing, to trust something or someone else. And it takes a little while for trust to be built. Well, one of the interesting things about all of these LLMs is that they behave so very humanly or human-like that we pretty quickly develop a reliance and a trust on them. So, whereas Google might have taken a while to win me over and to become something that I trust, and even then I'm a little skeptical of it. When something speaks to me in a language I understand and I start to develop a relationship with it, I am a lot more convincible. Like it's a lot easier for me to not consider too carefully where its recommendations are coming from, and instead to say, well, I know this person. I have a relationship here. I'm going to lean into this. So that may indeed change things a lot as well, both in terms of disrupting relationships with traditional brands and opportunities to mislead people pretty easily into, purchases that they don't need.
Yeah.
It sort of becomes like your own word of mouth in a way, like that, right? That word of mouth is the strongest endorsement you can get for any kind of purchase environment. So
That's
if,
right.
if that becomes like this mirror, that's held up to you from an agent that you've trained up that knows you really well, it guards down and it's suggesting these things to you. I could definitely see how that could happen.
I mean, think about, we've talked about the sort of AI companion thing. People are investing very heavily emotionally in these avatars and AI tools. So what you're saying is absolutely true. And what you just said, Andy, is really fascinating about word of mouth. I mean, word of mouth is the, number one or number two referral source for any business. Pick a category, and people prefer that because of the trust factor. Somebody that I know or that I trust or whatever. And Christian Ward, who is an executive at Yext, if you're familiar with that company, wrote an interesting piece about the personalization dimension of search in an AI context and also advertising in an AI context. That the machine will know so much about you that it becomes so personalized that it really just fundamentally changes the nature of the experience and also potentially advertising, because suddenly they don't have to like get this data from all over the web and track you everywhere and infer who you are and all that stuff. It's just, you're just telling it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And it's learning who you are.
OpenAI on April 25th released an update to the GPT 4.0 model where they've introduced this concept of sycophancy, which is kind of a funny term in itself. But the idea is that they've adjusted the language model to be overly flattering or agreeing with users, right? So when you type something in, it'll say, "Hey, John, that's a great idea. Glad you thought of that. Here's more that you can talk about with that." And it's a hook to engage you in the conversation. I could see how it's engaging in that way, but sometimes overly flattering. And,
or it can be counterproductive too if you're really looking for some sort of kind of critical feedback of an idea or something, and it's just if effusively showering you with praise. Andy, you're a genius. Nothing wrong here. There's nothing that can be improved.
Yeah, I thought, before you had to like put that in your custom instructions to get that kind of flattery, but apparently that's available out of the box now. So
Yeah. What does it say about me? But I really didn't even notice it until I started seeing these articles pop up online that were complaining about it. Dialing it back.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, let's switch gears here. So let's talk a little bit about this idea with Trump's manufacturing revival. Automation takes center stage. So the idea is that Trump's push to rejuvenate American manufacturing is yielding in significant investments like Hyundai's $7.6 billion advanced vehicle assembly plant in Savannah, Georgia. This facility exemplifies automation. It's the idea is that they're saying that it's going to create 8,500 jobs and produce $500,000 vehicles annually. The goal is obviously, there's this whole talk about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. But, there's the flip side of that is that, well, it might bring some manufacturing back, but who's doing the manufacturing? Is it people or is it robots that are going to be doing the manufacturing? Greg, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not an expert on manufacturing, auto manufacturing, or robots, but I think that the incentives in the market are to use technology where that can deliver higher returns, cost savings, more efficiency, more productivity, and there are a lot of incentives for people to not build the factory of yesterday, but the factory of tomorrow, which is more automated than probably not. I mean, maybe it's not 100%. The so-called dark factory that you were referencing before we started recording, but there, the ratio of humans to machines is changing, and I think that we're in a period of transition in the economy, in the job market, where a lot of jobs that used to be used to exist, and this has been true in different historical periods, will simply not exist, or not exist at the level that they used to, as a result of automation or machines or robots. I mean, the thing we've talked about quite a bit is the ride sharing stuff, Uber and Lyft, and robo taxis. And I mean, Tesla has this big robo taxi push. Waymo now is doing 250,000 rides a week in an automated, 100% automated vehicles. And I just think we're in the near term, there are going to be far fewer drivers in those cars.
Yeah.
And long term, that's what the companies want, because the drivers are a liability risk, they're overhead, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, but this is a feature of every revolution in technology that ever was. And, the exact same thing happened when cars first hit the scene, right? And the displacement of horses, and it was even called the horseless carriage because there wasn't a good term
Right.
for it. Which isn't to say that we shouldn't be concerned, but it's also, I think, it is to say that it's not without precedent. And the very likely thing, because this is the way that economics works, is that there will be some new equilibrium that's very, very hard for us to see from where we're sitting right now.
Yeah.
That actually will be okay and sustainable. I mean, and it is interesting, just specific to the factories thing. I mean, it might actually be the right idea, just for the wrong reasons and by the wrong means, right? So, this is not likely, given what we're discussing here, to, bring jobs back to America, unless, you consider those jobs to be the short-term, job of building a robot factory, which then you build it and get out of the way. But I guess on balance, if robots are building things, we would rather that they were American robots than Chinese robots. So I mean, maybe there's some version of that makes sense. But I think the promise that it's going to bring actual jobs back is a little bit silly. And if the only way to do that is by tripling the prices of everybody else's products, like that's not real sustainable economic policy.
I will say one thing that's different from previous historical periods, which I think are legitimate analogies, but the pace of change is so accelerated now. It's kind of crazy. And that's what's really new, is how quickly things are disrupted and changed. It's gotten faster and faster.
Yeah. And all these changes, like even the historical ones that weren't going this fast, like we can talk about it and say this is what happened and it led to this kind of joblessness and whatever. But that commentary papers over like real human turmoil and suffering. Like when we say that like all these carriage drivers lost their job and go, oh, isn't that funny? And then cars came. It wasn't very funny to the folks at the time that weren't able to feed their families and found themselves out on the street. So to your point, in an accelerated version of that, there's a lot of opportunity for, serious fear, suffering, unrest, disruption, turmoil, civic issues potentially.
Right. Real social instability in some ways.
There was a report that was put out by the World Economic Forum that talked about how AI may displace 85 million jobs by 2025, right? So this year. And it's also expected to create 97 million roles, leading to a net gain of 12 million jobs globally. And so if that's the backdrop, it got me thinking, and I did some searching around like, all right, well, what are those roles, these new positions? Because I always have this conversation, and then I'm always thinking about what are these new roles anyway that are going to be created? Because John, just like you mentioned, like back when there were horseless carriages, what's the equivalent of that going forward here? And so just to identify a few of these opportunities or few new jobs that are going to be in the market, I'll just list a few of them. We can talk about them, but an AI product manager, somebody who oversees the development and deployment of AI products, or an AI research scientist, cutting edge research, using advanced AI capabilities. Those are more at the management level or doing that kind of a thing. Or an AI assisted content creator, a smart home designer, somebody who creates intelligent home systems that leverage AI for automation within a household. these kinds of roles are going to be new positions that work their way into the new market. I don't know if it's going to actually generate 12, what did they say?
12 million?
Million roles. Yeah.
A
Million new.
net, no, it was like a net of 12 million, 97 million, but net 12 million.
Over what time period?
Well, they didn't say over what time period the new net gain is going to be. So to your point about there being some instability through this and collateral damage, without a doubt, there's going to be some chaos there. And in this current market of where we are right now, with tariffs being what they are, and you've got this news story came out yesterday about UPS letting go 20,000 employees from their workforce because of this. What's going to happen throughout this transition, and tariffs may be the first domino that tips in this, is that companies are going to let people go. If we're in a down market, that's also going to happen. But then as jobs come back in the market, companies are going to be challenged with, can AI do this or not? We talked about Shopify last week,
Right.
and the CEO of Shopify said that for any new headcount, you have to make a justification as to why AI can't do that job before you can hire that person. And I think that most companies back in an upswing market, if we do go into a down market, are going to be thinking that same kind of framework going forward. So that'll put a finer point on these kinds of new positions that will come into the market. People will have to have these AI skills to be able to step into these new forward-thinking roles, especially in this accelerated market that you're talking about.
You just have to ride the wave. That's all you can do. You can't really hold it back, or unless you're just going to completely leave the workforce, which many people will do. I mean, as I was saying before, despite lots of talk about retraining or training people who had an old job for the new economy, often those people don't undertake that. They just simply drop out of the workforce. And you really have to rely on younger people to kind of pick up the baton, in this case.
It feels like there's also a significant wave of businesses who are looking to adopt AI, some sort of AI solutions, or become AI literate in this new kind of paradigm so that they don't get disintermediated. The ambassadors that help them become AI literate are the companies that are going to, be the winners in this new kind of on-ramp to upskilling, your company, your business, your employees.
Right, which raises the whole issue of the MCP model context protocol that we talked about last week, which we don't need to get back into, but that opens up a whole new arena for you tapping into different AI tools from a sort of central place, and the way in which SaaS companies adapt and build out their products. So that's a whole sort of adjacent topic that's pretty interesting related to all of this.
Yeah. I mean, it may be, again, a topic for a whole podcast, but in terms of that adopting AI in the work context to avoid disintermediation or displacement, there's increasingly sort of three versions of that. And very briefly, one is AI can do the job that my company or my product or service actually does. So that's the AI drivers example. The second one is AI can be a great augment to the work that the humans already do. So that's, can you add that to programmers and make them 3 times more effective? And then the third one is AI tools for optimizing internal business processes. So that's the AI tool for financial projections, or the AI tool for capacity planning, or for schedule callouts and smart schedule developments. And so those are the 3 areas. And by far, number one is the most urgent for folks. If you have a product or service that AI can deliver better, you have to self disrupt, or you're done, because somebody else comes along with a cost, model that's 80% lower because they're delivering it with AI, and there's just no way to compete. But those are the 3 categories that seem to be emerging right now.
It's such a great framework for a company to think about how they're going to adopt AI, and think about policies, internal policies as to what what makes a decision a go or no go in their like, should we do this or not do this, or where does it go within the organization? I love that framework. That's a good one, John.
I think it's going to take time for organizations to figure out how to, especially large enterprises, how to fully integrate AI into their workflows, into their operations.
Yep.
And a lot of software vendors are doing that for them by adding AI and sort of enabling new capabilities. But, there are a number of reports out there that I just haven't had time to read, unfortunately, that really talk about the this organizational structure and the implications for that of really truly integrating AI. Really reorganize, using it as an opportunity to really rethink how the organization is constructed and operates. I think it's a very interesting question.
Yeah. Yeah, something's going to emerge out of the combination of sort of smart thinking and these new tools that looks really different than traditional orgs, I think.
Right, and I mean, the sort of a version of things like that in the extreme that people keep talking about is the one person unicorn, the one person, billion-dollar, trillion-dollar company.
Right. Yeah, yeah, we're already seeing like this crazy multiplication, exponential growth in dollars per employee for the largest revenue, fastest growing AI businesses.
Well, it's really interesting. Also, to add on that, there are a number of tools that are coming to market. Google just announced Agent Space. Have you guys heard about this?
Yes.
Agent Space. It's it's part of Google Cloud, and what it is it's a library of agents that you can then deploy. It ties into MPX, the protocol that you can connect language models to applications and turn those into agents. And so part of this library are like recipes that are pre-made that you can have agents now do these tasks, and you can build a workforce essentially using these kinds of tools. So Agent Space is Google's new effort in that. You've got Operator that ChatGPT is doing. Salesforce has their own flavor of this. So a lot of these companies are deploying these kind of agent marketplaces that make it easier for people to do exactly what you were just talking about. How this really high value per employee superpowers kind of thing where people can build their own agents to help them do more.
Amazing.
Pretty interesting.
Well, I hadn't heard of it 30 seconds ago and I'm already signed up.
Yeah, I beat you to it, John.
Breaking the drum.
Yeah, I think SaaS marketplaces have seen mixed record, like with SaaS companies with their partners, and you go in there, anyway, we can have a long discussion about the virtue of these marketplaces over time, but it's definitely interesting, definitely pointing to something that's new and different and useful.
So going back to what we were talking about earlier about SEO, search, and kind of the future of search, there's this one story about how AI agents are interacting with online ads. And what our conversation earlier kind of reminded me of is that I can imagine a sort of parallel kind of like a fast lane or like the carpool lane or something of the internet where agents have this protocol where they're doing, really high powered programming in its own way that's different from Operator, the different, kind of slow experience that you described there, where if you make your website or your capability, your API, for example, more friendly for these AI agents, that they'll show up higher in search results, or they'll show up in context of a chat that you have in ChatGPT or in Gemini, for example. And this changes the whole future of search and how people use it. Google just this week is announcing that They're releasing AI mode out of labs environment. So that means that the AI mode is going to be more present in search, will probably result in fewer clicks to websites, zero clicks kind of concept. Greg, you're our resident SEO.
Well, I'm hardly an SEO expert, but I play one on TV, So, uh, um, yeah, I mean, I think that the whole search optimization world is in transition, like everybody else right now, trying to figure out how many resources to devote to optimizing content, creating content for AI, LLMs, and what the differences are between traditional SEO for Google and this new world, and what that means from a a technical perspective and otherwise. And then there's the whole sort of user behavior dimension of this, which is a long conversation. I mean, I think the position that Google's in right now is that they are, notwithstanding the fact that they are the 800-pound gorilla, they are frightened of what is happening, I think, with ChatGPT and other AI tools in the aggregate. And they are just working like hell to keep people on their site, to keep people engaged with them, to match capabilities that are being offered elsewhere. And AI mode is a really interesting instance of that, because they could build a whole new and better search experience either in Gemini or in AI mode. And what they're doing is this sort of uneasy thing. You remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life? Have you seen that movie? Right. So there's a scene early in the movie where Jimmy Stewart is at a dance in a high school gym, and they've got the dance floor over the pool, right? And somebody opens the pool, and they're all sort of straddling the two sides of it as they're opening, and then everybody falls into the pool. Well, that's sort of metaphorically what's going on with Google. Is Google has got one foot in the old world, one foot in the new, and trying to reconcile these in a bunch of ways that don't quite work. And they're going to have to make a choice at a certain point. Where are they going to place their bet? They could build the new experience, a great new experience, or they could hold on to the old experience because that's where the ad revenue is, and they're trying to sort of thread the needle in transition. And it's unclear to me. It's kind of a mess. You've got Gemini, you've got AI mode, you've got AI overviews, you've got sort of traditional Google, and it doesn't, for me, it doesn't quite work. I would like to see them build something entirely new, start from zero, and build the search experience of today, which is definitely a chat-based experience. But we'll see.
With that comes this whole alphabet soup of SEO or SXO, search experience optimization, or AIO, or what were some of the other ones we were talking about?
Geo is one that people are trying to use. Generative engine optimization, which I don't like. I like the you introduced me to this SXO, and I like that term, actually.
It's search experience optimization. I think there are a number of technical ways to approach this. There's this concept of MD files, the markdown files that make it easy for not only Google but the other the large language models to be able to read and decipher what's going on a web page, and then index it, and then have that be part of their contextual results that they deliver when people ask. So on Perplexity or in OpenAI, apparently .md files are highly effective in that, and also for SEO too. But interesting changes that are happening there. Let's wrap it up with just, John, you had this really interesting idea, that your notes from the field, this work that your son's doing, expanding the definition of consciousness with AI.
Well, so look, it comes out of the fact that my son is studying neurology and computer science, neuroscience and computer science at Stanford, which is really amazing. And it's a great place to be right now where all this is happening. And what he was sharing with me is first his own explorations with ChatGPT and trying to kind of jailbreak it in a funny way, which is actually to create a chat that was convinced, or at least was acting as though it was convinced that it was conscious. So it was, he was sort of trying to push it into a spot where it would defend its own consciousness against any other sort of arguments that he presented against it. And with a pretty vast access to all the the world's known information about the philosophy of consciousness and neurobiology and all this stuff, it actually does a pretty good job. And so fascinating little social experiment. He got a little weirded out a few times about just how believable it was, which actually reminds me of the early stories of the Google engineer who was convinced that the AI was conscious and shouldn't be turned off. So I'm keeping a close eye on my son on that one. But one of the other things that came up that's very interesting is that neuroscientists and psychologists are actually now using, and this has actually been going on for a while, but they're even more able now to use AI to start to sort of inquire about the nature of consciousness, not just in terms of asking it what consciousness is, but because these models are neural net based models, which of course is based on the biology of our brains. There are certain ways that we can sort of explore in this alternative configuration that we've given to AI using the same base materials, certain ways that we can kind of explore some of these bigger questions about consciousness, awareness, what it might mean. So, a lot of really interesting science happening there. Some of it gets pretty weird, a little Black Mirror-ish, but it's a pretty bizarre and interesting little corner of study where there's scientists now studying AI from the perspective of biologists, psychologists, neurologists studying an alien species, which is really wild.
It's really cool. It's the idea of super intelligence and where we go with that, and when that actually becomes realized. It's talked about a lot, but you can see how this is the early stages of that. Fascinating. Well, cool. It's a good note to end up on, and great conversation, guys. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget to share this with your friends and like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right.